Hey guys, so I'm just waiting for everyone that was at my previous live to join so I can finish up answering some questions. Hello, I'm just waiting for everyone to join back up, and then I will answer those questions on PCOS with no period, and then progesterone cream. Hello, I want to make sure that everyone joins back up so that I can answer their questions. Okay, so I got a question on PCOS with no period. I think it said PCOS with no period, help. In that situation, you really have to ask yourself, remember, a lack of a period is not a lack of a period. A lack of a period means you're not ovulating, and that's the problem. You only get a period when you ovulate. So, or I shouldn't say that because that's not necessarily true. You can get a period without ovulating, but ovulation really does bring a true period, which is, your body built up uterine lining for a potentially fertilized egg, and then your body now has to shed the dead egg and the uterine lining, and that is what a true period is. And then if you get a bleed without an ovulation, that's really considered a withdrawal bleed or an ovulatory bleed. So, you really have to ask yourself, what are my barriers to ovulation? What's maybe preventing my body from ovulating? And that is the main question. So in a lot of women with PCOS, it's hypothyroidism. It's suboptimal thyroid function. So if your doctor hasn't already tested TSH, T4, and T3, that is ASAP. That needs to be done ASAP-amundo. The next thing is you need to make sure your stress hormones aren't high. So cortisol, adrenaline, prolactin can sometimes be high in women with PCOS, which is absolutely a stress hormone in high amounts. And those are kind of the main ones. So I always look to stress hormones and thyroid first, which are usually very regularly what's causing an anovulatory cycle or your inability to ovulate, which is going to affect your ability to have a period. That's the first thing. And that is usually enough. I do have a highlight story labeled progesterone that talks about what is the barriers to ovulation, how do you actually get ovulating, and to make more progesterone. And that also helps with hypothalamic amenorrhea or the loss of a period. So that's important to listen to and go. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm looking for the next question. Would an endometrial ablation affect hormones? I'm not sure. It can. Any kind of trauma on a tissue can cause a stress response, so I don't see why it wouldn't. But it, I also, I'm not saying that it absolutely could affect your hormones. I'm really honestly not sure. Can you say the name of the progesterone again? That is same as bioidentical. I missed it. Oh yeah, I didn't answer that question. So, bioidentical progesterone can be bought over the counter, and it's also a prescription, so it's kind of like a gray area. But the over-the-counter creams that I like that are available on Amazon are Emerita brand, Emerita, and Smoky Mountain Naturals. So those are kind of the two main ones that are available over the counter. There's also another one that is a oral sublingual called Progest E. So you would just type it in. It's available on 2 different websites that are not like Amazon. They're more like small, individually, personally owned supplement companies. It kind of seems a little scammy, but I promise you Progest E is a wonderful progesterone supplement. So those are kind of the main over-the-counter ones. And then the rest of the ones like oral, like compounded progesterone usually has to be prescribed by your doctor, and so does compounded progesterone cream. So those are usually doctors recommend. I would take it by your doctor's recommendation if you're doing it with your doctor. If you're not, usually proper supplementation of progesterone cream is from when you ovulate, if you ovulate, up until your next bleed or your period. If you're not ovulating, you can kind of just say like, okay, I'm going to do it from day 14 where you would technically ovulate up until menstruation. So it's just dependent. Like if you're ovulating, you want to wait until after you ovulate to supplement with progesterone. And if you're not ovulating, you would just kind of take it from like when you would technically ovulate up until menstruation or halfway through your cycle or so. Have you heard of a neuroadrenal test, urine or saliva test for cortisol and adrenaline? Could this be helpful, pricey, but doctor recommended to see impact on thyroid hormones? I have heard of it. It just kind of depends, you guys. So with these tests, tests can be very, very helpful, but they're not everything. And a lot of times I find that a lot of my clients have gone to so many doctors and run so many tests, like thousands of dollars worth. I've had people come to me that have already run $15,000 worth of tests. And not only did that doctor run that test on them, but the results came back and they were just kind of like, okay, yeah, that's fine. You know, like they didn't really have a reason why they ran the test in the first place, and they didn't really weren't going to like really utilize that test as a tool. And so you really need to ask that doctor what she's going to do with that test. If this test comes back as blah, 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 what is she going to do about it? Or if this test comes back as this, what is she going to do about it? Because that is really the question that needs to be asked to find if a test is going to be effective. And a lot of times I find that doctors are like, they don't actually know the answer to that question. They're like, oh, I just wanted to know. And I'm like, that's not good enough for me to spend $500, you know, or however expensive the test is. So I just really recommend asking the right questions. What is she going to do about it if it does come back as high? If she's just going to put you on thyroid medication anyways, then why doesn't she just do it now? You know, so it's like you kind of have to feel it out, and you have to ask the right questions. You need to ask if, you know, this test is really truly going to be valuable and offer you information that you can act upon, or is it just going to be an expensive test that you run that just ends up being in the pile over there of all the other functional tests you've run? So, you know, a lot of tests are very helpful. It just really depends on how the practitioner or the doctor is going to use them. And that's really going to depend on what's going to determine their value. What kind of vitamin brands do you like? I recommend getting as much nutrients from food as you can, you guys. So I recommend like using smoked oysters as a multivitamin, grass-fed liver once or twice per week for vitamin A, making sure you're getting enough vitamin D from the sun, supplementing with vitamin K, or making sure you're getting plenty of raw dairy products. If you need a certain supplement, I like Thorne brand. Thorne is really good. What else do I use? Like Douglas Laboratories sometimes. What else? I'm trying to think. Like Biotics Research, like the main nutraceutical brands. Sometimes, like the less expensive brands, like Now or Jarrow, can be sufficient enough. You just kind of want to look at I guess the fillers. That's the biggest problem with supplements, is so many people take supplements, but they don't realize that the fillers in those supplements actually are very usually gut irritants and can cause inflammation and stress on the body. So that's why I take a very minimal approach to supplementation. I also really like this brand on, sorry, I have the window open, I'm like getting dust in my eyes. I really like the brand Bulk Supplements on Amazon. They sell bulk supplements. Like, oh my gosh, imagine that. Bulk Supplements on Amazon sells individual nutrients in their powdered form in a bag. And you're going to be like, oh, I want a real supplement. That is a real supplement, and they're really inexpensive. So let's say you want to like supplement with vitamin B1. You buy their vitamin B1 powder for like $10 for a huge 2-pound bag, and you literally have like, I think sometimes like 2,000 servings of a supplement. So, and they also have an option to buy it in like a smaller capsulated form. So like if you wanted to try a supplement first, and I really like that they just put the supplement in a gelatin capsule, and it's usually just the supplement and the gelatin capsule. And that's way better than taking a supplement that has been formulated, because usually it has a lot of fillers in it. So I use bulk supplements mostly on myself because you save a shit ton of money, and you also are taking the pure supplement, you know, it's just pure. And then I'll use like Life Extension, Thorne, Douglas Laboratories, Biotics Research, like just a variety of brands that I trust when needed, like if I need a blend of something or something like that. I also like Health Force, like they have a good detox, parasite cleanse, liver cleanse, that kind of thing. And Organic Olivia, her products seem to be pretty good as well. What do you recommend for hypothyroid to replace Armour? I actually don't recommend to replace Armour. I think Armour's a really great thing to be on. Like if you, people have to understand that thyroid supplementation can actually be very therapeutic for a damaged metabolism, but it's not the only thing you should be doing. So, you know, when you're supplementing thyroid, that's just one step to a huge metabolic issue. And you really do need to do a lot more than just take a thyroid medication in order to truly heal a thyroid problem or actually get your thyroid function optimal. But Armour, like I take natural desiccated thyroid, too. Like I think that it's very therapeutic, it's anti-cancerous, it's anti-inflammatory, and if it's necessary, by all means, take it. It's just not the only thing that needs to be done for a thyroid issue. Absolutely true about running tests. Have spent too much without much results. Yeah, unfortunately, like I said, tests are so helpful, but they're not the whole thing. And if you have like high stress symptoms, that's the weirdest thing is like, if somebody's trying to test adrenaline and cortisol, for example, like there's a lot of symptoms that are indicative of adrenaline and cortisol. Also, a lot of times you can test that in the blood, and then if it doesn't come back that it's on the blood, you don't stop there, then you would run the more expensive test. So a lot of times I try to get my doctors to run as much blood tests as possible because my insurance covers it. And then, if we need to run the more functional, expensive tests, then that's like the second option. We go by symptoms, but we also utilize labs. And if labs don't indicate that the symptoms have a root cause, you dig deeper. You don't say like, oh, the labs are normal, you're fine. Like, obviously you're not fine, So that's what I'm trying to get across. Hi, Jessica. So my TPO for Hashimoto's went from 59 to 4. Woohoo! Then the next abnormal thing was DHEA and D-testosterone high. I guess it can possibly be PCOS. After researching, I wonder if I had PCOS first. Okay, so this is very interesting, and this is a very interesting case, and I'm just going to use it as an example for everyone here. So, and obviously I'm not a doctor, you guys. Like I always say this is a disclaimer. This is me just doing educational and informational advice, but I do know a lot about hormones. So when you have, I'm just so excited about this because this all goes together. So remember how I said in my last live that DHEA and testosterone are protective against stress. There are tissues in your body, specifically your vital organs, your lungs, your heart, and your brain that have high amounts of DHEA and testosterone in them that actually protects them from stress. Because remember how I said stress, in the presence of stress or high cortisol and adrenaline, your body starts to break down its own tissues to send to the liver so that the liver can turn it into glucose to keep the blood sugar levels stable. And so your vital organs need to be spared from that, right? We don't want to be breaking down our heart tissue under stress. And so when stress is high, we tend to see high DHEA and high testosterone as a response to stress. Then, here we go. You had your TPO antibodies. Think about this. Estrogen is anti-thyroid. And the body tends to raise testosterone and DHEA in the presence of too much estrogen. So have you tested your estrogen and where are your stress levels at? Cortisol, adrenaline, and estrogen would be the things that you want to check out. A lot of times in estrogen dominance, we see these weird symptoms start to pop up. We see thyroid issues, then we see PCOS type symptoms like high androgens, and I see this happen all the time where like one issue pops up and then you fix it, and then another issue pops up and you fix it, because you're not really getting to the root cause, that it's stress, inflammation, and estrogen driving the issue. So I recommend getting your estrogen levels tested, cortisol levels tested, and adrenaline levels tested. You can also get your prolactin levels tested. If you have low T3, make sure you're making enough progesterone, because a lot of times when you don't have enough T3, you're not. So those are all things that I would check out, but they all are interrelated. So thyroid issues are very directly related to your hormones and vice versa. I hope that made sense. I sometimes overcomplicate things because I'm like, I see the whole picture, but then I'm like trying to get it across. Are supplements for liver close to eating liver? Not crazy about the taste. Oh yeah, I mean, neither am I. Another thing that you could do, like if you want to, because desiccated liver supplements can kind of get expensive, and they do lose a little bit of their benefit in that freeze drying process. I'm not saying don't use them. I personally use them. But another thing that you can do is you can actually, if you can handle beef liver and it doesn't like completely disgust you, I know some people are just like, I can't even touch it, it's disgusting. But if you can touch it, but you just don't want to eat it, what you can actually do is you can cut it into small, like swallow size or capsule size pieces, put it on a cookie sheet, put it in the freezer, freeze it, and then just put it into a bag or like a Pyrex dish, and then swallow it whole and just take it like a supplement. And that's like your own grass-fed liver supplement, you know. Remember though, you guys, don't take liver every single day because it can suppress thyroid function. So that's why I say, you know, take liver about once or twice a week and then be done with it. Don't take it every single day, or it can actually end up lowering your thyroid function. Not fun. Estrogen is low. Okay, so estrogen is low. Here's the deal, you guys. Remember, bloodstream is not where hormones end up. The tissues are. And so a lot of times women have estrogen like symptoms or low thyroid function, but they have low estrogen coming back on their blood test. So why is that? Well, remember, progesterone helps estrogen mobilize from the tissues so that it can get sent to the liver to be detoxified in either the poop or the pee. But if the liver is not functioning optimally, what happens? It drops back into the bloodstream and your body has to protect you from it. So where does it go? It goes into the tissues, specifically the fat cells. And the only thing that can help mobilize estrogen is progesterone. And so if you don't have enough progesterone or you're not making enough, which remember, optimal levels are 8 nanograms per deciliter. So you want to make sure that your progesterone levels 5 to 7 days after ovulation are 8 and above, or you could actually have quote unquote estrogen in your tissues and it's not mobilizing. So that is a possibility, because a lot of times I have women come to me and they quote unquote, their doctors tell them they had low estrogen because that's what came back on a blood test. But they have estrogen dominance-like symptoms: cramping, heavy periods, migraines, clotting, sore breasts, inflammation, puffiness. They're gaining weight rapidly. All of those things are signs of high estrogen or estrogen dominance in relationship to progesterone. But then why is estrogen coming back on a lab test in your blood low? And that's a question that needs to be asked. Sometimes estrogen really is low, and that's relevant. However, if symptoms are pointing to high estrogen levels, ask yourself if you have enough progesterone and if estrogen is being able to be mobilized from the tissues. I hope that makes sense. Can you just go and request to get those tested? Who would I go to? Yeah, I mean, I would just ask your doctor. Like, that's a good place to start, is ask your doctor. Depending on your doctor, how open-minded they are, how busy they are. I mean, everything, the way that you approach them, it just kind of depends. But I would start with your main doctor. Once you ask your doctor and they say no, then you would look into someone that maybe has a more holistic perspective or could maybe be more open-minded or is functional or integrative or anti-aging. But yeah, you usually can ask your doctor, specifically if they're open-minded, they will help you out there. Hey Jess, if my T3 and T4 are in normal range, but TSH is high. Yeah, so TSH, remember you guys, is the hormone that your pituitary gland in your brain uses to talk to your thyroid. And so when it's high, it usually indicates that there's some type of stress going on. The body's like trying to say, hey thyroid, like kick it up into gear. And the thyroid has to respond. And so you usually optimally want your TSH levels between 1 and 2. Cortisol can suppress TSH, so sometimes when people have hypothyroid symptoms, but their TSH is in the normal range between 1 and 2, they're like really confused. So just remember, when stress is high, sometimes TSH can be unnaturally suppressed. But yeah, if TSH is high, that's usually an indicator that there's some kind of stress going on. I usually recommend that when TSH is high, you get your prolactin checked as well, because the pituitary is responsible for making prolactin and also responsible for making TSH. So sometimes they're usually, I should say most of the time, they're both high. I was on Armour for low thyroid, felt dizzy and jittery. Is this normal? No. So remember that when thyroid function is starting to actually work properly, you need to make sure that you're consuming enough fuel relevant to your metabolic activity. So a lot of the mistake that a lot of people make that get jittery or overstimulated by thyroid is they're not eating enough. They're not eating enough sugar, not enough carbs, not enough saturated fats, not enough protein, because they've gotten so used to their low metabolic function. And when your metabolism speeds up, so does your need for energy and for fuel. And if you don't have enough, your body has to make it. Remember, how does your body make glucose? How does your body make fuel? Raise stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, which make you feel jittery, make you feel dizzy. And so you need to make sure you're eating enough and eating enough energy before you supplement with thyroid. Sugar specifically can be really helpful as a therapeutic agent. It's very adaptogenic in that time when you're transitioning from having very low thyroid function to like normal thyroid function. Hey Jess, how many calories should an overweight person in their 200s eat? Yeah, this is totally not easy to answer. It just depends on so many factors. How active are you? What are your energy levels like? What are your stress levels throughout the day? Are you sedentary? I mean, all those factors really matters. So I recommend you have a natural biological signal that tells you how much you should be eating. When you're hungry, you consume a balanced meal that has protein, carb, and fat. When you're hungry again, you consume another balanced meal that contains protein, carb, and fat. And that's what you do. When your body's hungry, you eat. And your body will adjust accordingly. But just remember, what you eat and the quality of what you eat is so much more important than the amount of calories that you eat. So usually it just really depends on your activity levels. If you're very active, if you work an active or stressful, high stress job, those are all things that are going to affect the amount of food you need. So you want your fuel intake, because that is what food is. You want your fuel intake to be reflective of your fuel needs. Also, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, you guys. This is so bothersome to me. I'm trying not to look at myself and I keep seeing that. Okay, so when you're trying to decipher how many calories or how much fuel your cells need, you need to keep something in mind. If you want your metabolism to work efficiently, does it make sense in your head to restrict fuel? So if you were driving a Ferrari, would you say, I want you to function better, so I'm going to put less gasoline in you? No. That makes no sense. So you have to think of that in those terms. Your body needs energy in order to burn energy, and it's just the right kind of energy. But you have biological signals that tell you when you're hungry and need fuel and when you're satisfied. But I recommend at least keeping it around at least above 17 to 1800 calories, but of the right fuel. And at least if you're getting enough movement in the day. So it just really depends on the situation. I really can't give you like exact advice because it just depends. Normal TSH, but low T3 and T4 and low estrogen, no period. What can I take or do to improve the thyroid? Yeah, so think of food as metabolic energy. Do not restrict fuel. Make sure you're getting most of your fats from saturated sources. Make sure that you're getting enough carbs and enough sugar at every single meal from either fruits or roots. Those are my two favorites. And then you can do like small amounts of coconut sugar and raw honey and maple syrup, but don't restrict food. That's the biggest thing when it comes to metabolic function, is when you restrict, your body has to slow the metabolism in order to spare fuel. And that's not the place we want to be. So I would recommend, like, the biggest thing is just making sure you're eating enough energy. That's my main goal for people that have low T3 and T4. And then if that doesn't help after, 8 weeks or so of consistency, you don't see your hands and feet warming or your metabolic rate speeding up, then at that point, sometimes taking like some natural desiccated thyroid that's prescribed by your doctor can be really, really helpful for even a short period of time to get things moving in the right direction. And some doctors will even prescribe you straight T3, which can sometimes even be more helpful. I feel pressure in my head, which feels related to a blocked feeling in my ears. Could this have anything to do with hormones? It could. I see a lot of times actually though it has to do with some kind of candida or infection. So you have to understand that candida and yeast can get into the sinuses. Candida yeast really likes mucousy type areas, warm, mucus, wet type areas, just like fungus or mold. And so very regularly people do have candida overgrowth in their sinuses, and candida left alone long term will build protective mechanisms around themselves called biofilms. And biofilms clog you even more. Like, it feels like a blocked feeling, just like you're describing, either in your sinuses or in your ears, that kind of thing. So sometimes it can be fungus. I'm not saying it is, because I don't really know the situation. It could be a lot of different things, but sometimes doing, like, you can type in on Google, Dave Asprey of Bulletproof has this sinus rinse that's meant for breaking down biofilms in the sinuses. He combines like xylitol and grapefruit seed extract and actually shows you how to suck it up into your sinuses to kind of clear biofilms. I know it sounds weird, but it truly does work. It works for when you have like a sinus infection and stuff. But it can also help in cases like that. So it could be that. But honestly, if it's not that, I'm not sure. Yeah, I've never heard of that being related to hormones. Do I need to get my progesterone levels tested, or can I just take it if I know it's low? That's up to your discretion. Like, I'm not a doctor, so you kind of need to decide and trust your gut in that situation. It's important to like get checked, pretty, I don't want to say regularly, but you don't want it to cover up symptoms. So sometimes like progesterone levels, like people are irresponsible sometimes with progesterone, and they'll take it when they do need it, but they have other issues going on that are driving their hormonal issues, and they never get it checked out by a doctor. And like in really scary cases, it can end up being like endometrial cancer and things. So if you haven't brought your hormone issues or your symptoms up to your doctor ever, it's probably a good idea to do so. But I do find that a lot of women get turned down by their doctor. Their doctor shuts them down when they talk about progesterone, and it's really discouraging. So if that's the case, then you kind of do have to take your health into your own hands. So that's really like you. If you're, you kind of need to decide for yourself. If you know it's low, it's worth experimenting with. And it is responsible, though, to get checked, periodically to make sure you're not going crazy on the progesterone. But a lot of women can feel immediately if it's working, like they instantly feel a state of calm after about 30 minutes or so, or they kind of do feel more anxiety. So when it's not working for them, so a lot of women can feel it working or feel that it's not working, but if you have any concerns, of course, talk to your doctor. But that's something that you kind of need to decide. And honestly, like on the Amazon reviews on those progesterone creams, there's a lot of testimonies. There's thousands. And so that's a great resource. Reddit is also a great place if you're like looking into, should I do something? I want other people's experiences, maybe some things they can warn me about. Look at forums and Amazon reviews. There's a lot of women share their stories. So, it's up to your discretion, really, honestly, what you feel is right to you. Do you recommend giving up meat and fish? No, definitely not. Definitely not. If anybody knows me, they know that I'm a huge proponent of making sure you're getting bioavailable sources of nutrients and proteins, which really only comes from animal foods, to be honest. And the reason why people go on vegan diets and feel so good at first is because their body still has a lot of those amino acids in it. But there does come a point where your body becomes depleted and eventually it becomes deficient. Why do so many studies show that low saturated fat is better for your health? You recommend saturated fats. So this has a little bit to do with industry bias, and this started actually a very long time ago in the 70s, or in the 60s, really, and you kind of have to know the story. So so you kind of probably understand that oil-based paints are illegal now, and you're like, wait, what do oil-based paints have to do with this? What? So oil-based paints in the 60s, 50s actually used to be made out of flax oil, fish oil, canola oil, soybean oil, and like sunflower oil, like seed oils. That's the oils that they actually used in oil-based paints. But when oil-based paints were kind of being phased out and water-based paints were coming in, they had to figure out what they were going to do with the seed oil and the fish oil and the seed oil, fish oil industry. And so they decided they were going to start putting it in our food, because heaven forbid we stop using these toxic oils altogether. Let's just put them in our food instead of use them in paints. And so this has been going on for almost 70 years now, and they began to start to really manipulate the science. You really have to be a scientist or have a good understanding of science to see how studies get manipulated. So when a industry or when a company is looking for a specific outcome for research to prove something, they set up an experiment in just a way where the outcome is going to be in their favor. Just, you get me? So they begin to manipulate studies and combine certain things together to show an outcome. And so a lot of times the studies that prove that saturated fats are damaging are not actually using just saturated fats. They're using like a mixture of like saturated and polyunsaturated fats. And so how could you tell me that it's truly the saturated fats that are causing the issue? What if it's the polyunsaturated fats? So you really have to understand a study and understand how they're actually going through the experiment before you can actually see if a study is actually relevant or not, or kind of biased or being affected in a certain push in a certain direction. And so I'm just going to leave you with this. Saturated fats are what babies are born with. Their cells are completely full of amide acid, saturated fatty acids. Their cells have not been exposed to one polyunsaturated fats except for the ones that the mother has consumed. A baby's cell is completely a saturated fat organism. Once the baby is born, remember, breast milk is mostly sugar, and so babies metabolize sugar very quickly. You watch how they heal very quickly, their hair goes very rapidly, their metabolism is working very quickly, right? A baby is a wonderful representation of the power of saturated fats. But as a baby consumes polyunsaturated fats, their metabolism clearly slows. And a lot of studies point to this fact. It's just kind of buried because there's such a big push for these industrial seed oils, because if we really proved that these industrial seed oils are the cause of obesity, are the cause of metabolic syndrome and diabetes, which there are tons of research studies that show that polyunsaturated fats damage the liver, destroy the beta cells in the pancreas, that actually damage the cell's ability to metabolize glucose, damage the thyroid, and actually kind of collect in the thyroid. If we were to actually prove that, or that was to actually become mainstream, think about all of the companies that would be affected. Industrial seed oils are cheap, you guys. They used to be a toxic chemical, and then they decided to put them into the food system, and that is when they became considered a food. And then polyunsaturated fats even became deemed as essential fatty acids, which it was never known before or even thought that polyunsaturated fats were essential fatty acids until this whole industry change occurred. So in all honesty, I think it's some pretty shady shit. I personally only consume saturated fats for the most part, and I'm pretty healthy. I actually find my metabolism working better as I'm actually like casually avoiding industrial seed oils and really slowly trying to not consume them as much. And I don't know. It's one of those things where you kind of have to decide for yourself. Sadly, we live in a society where industry runs science and not the other way around. And sadly, science is very relative to the individual funding the science. Reasons for ringing in my ears. Usually that's a B2 deficiency very regularly. It can also be a stress hormone issue, like a cortisol issue. But I find a lot of people get rid of ringing in their ears by just taking a B complex that includes B1 and B2. How can we improve thyroid metabolism by eating fruits and roots if we have SIBO? Oh, that's a good question. So, the question that you need to ask yourself is, why did you get SIBO in the first place? And the small intestine is supposed to be a sterile environment, right? So why did that happen in the first place? Well, think of it this way. Slow metabolic function equals slow digestive transit. When things are slowly moving through the digestive tract, they start to rot, they start to ferment, and they start to proliferate bacteria and fungus where it does not belong. So is SIBO a gut issue or a metabolic issue? It's a metabolic issue. This is why SIBO is a constant recurring infection in a lot of people. They're just trying to kill the SIBO, get rid of the SIBO, and not focusing on why the SIBO is there in the first place. If things are slowly moving through your digestive tract, they will sit there, they will ferment, and they will rot. I don't care what you eat, it will still be happening. So it's one of those things where you get to decide if your SIBO is constantly recurring infection, it might be a good idea to speed up your metabolism. In SIBO, I try to stick with things that are like not going to feed bacteria. So instead of doing whole fruits with fibers and starches, doing mostly like fruit juices and sugars. Obviously, that's not optimal, but if you have a a problem in your gut where things are rotting and fermenting and proliferating bacteria, something needs to happen to fuel your metabolic function without feeding those organisms. So, you kind of have to weigh both options, but you have to always ask yourself when it comes to small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, why is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth happening in the first place? That does not just happen, you guys. Your body doesn't just say like, one day, I give up, grow in my small intestine. The system is breaking down, and you have a very specific something called the migrating motor complex that is an electrical current that actually runs from the top of the small intestine and is like an electrical current that goes all the way through the 20 feet, I believe, of your small intestine to keep it sterile. It makes it contract and push bacteria and any contents that are left over into the large intestine. And that is very energy intensive. The migrating motor complex relies on proper thyroid function in order to work. And a lot of doctors don't realize this. They don't even recognize the migrating motor complex is a huge issue when it comes to small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. When it comes to SIBO, you don't just kill the bacteria. That's not the goal there. The goal is to make sure that the digestive system is optimally functioning and transit time is fast and quick enough so that it never sits and rots there again. Get it? And then it also can have to do with low stomach acid. So remember, your stomach acid is kind of that first line of defense for your digestive tract. And when stress hormones are high and thyroid function is low, enzyme production and hydrochloric acid production will be low in the stomach, which allows a lot of bacteria to pass through into the small intestine. So it's all interrelated, you guys. Your metabolism completely affects your digestive tract and vice versa. And if you are just trying to treat one without treating the other, you end up just with these recurring infections. And if you kill SIBO, then Candida pops up, and then you kill Candida and this pops up, and you have to ask yourself, why is that happening? It's not just like your body like allows that to happen. It's those organisms are invasive, they are opportunistic, and they are getting an opportunity to grow. But I find that a lot of people that go on like Candida diets or small intestinal bacteria overgrowth diets end up just getting these recurrent infections because they're so low in sugar and so low in carbs that they're ending up damaging their metabolism, and then it just happens again. And it's just like this vicious cycle. So there is a fine balance, and you kind of have to find a sweet spot with your carbohydrate intake. And not all carbs affect each person with SIBO differently. So everyone's a little bit different. You have to know if you have hydrogen or methane-based SIBO. Like, there's so many different things that play a role in a proper SIBO treatment. So what do I ask the doctor for? Thyroxine or something different? Also, how do I figure out how much I should be eating? And pretty sure I am eating the amount of the calculator online said. Listen to what you just said. You are relying on a calculator online to tell you how much your body needs to eat. Do you hear that? And this is a problem with our society, you guys. Your body tells you how much you need to eat, period. If you are hungry, you need to eat. If you are craving food, by the time 7 p.m. comes around, you want to eat your whole kitchen, that shows you that you did not eat enough throughout the day. You need to listen to your body over any app, calculator, nutritionist, I don't care who they are. Your body knows best. And if your body's suboptimally functioning, you need to feed it properly. And so I don't care what the online calculator says. Listen to your body. How are your moods? How's your energy? How's your digestion? How is your personality? Are you feeling really withdrawn and closed off? Or are you feeling open and happy and optimistic? Those are all signs of eating enough. And if you're not eating enough, you're going to be Mr. Grouchy Pants, and you're going to be snappy, and you're going to have low energy, and you're not going to be sleeping well, and your digestion is going to be slow, and you're going to have maybe constipation or diarrhea. And those are signs that you're not fueling your body properly. So you need to be eating enough. Most women need to be eating at least 1,800 calories, usually more, like around 2,000 to 2,500, especially if they're exercising. So online calculators are absolutely like ridiculously false. They're not based in any science or metabolic training. So, you need to be listening to your body first of all. That's the first thing. So if you've been going by an online calculator, I would focus first on fueling your body properly. Then if you 8 weeks down the line still feel like you're your thyroid function is suboptimal. Usually, like if your TSH is low, they're really unwilling to give you thyroxine. So you would want to maybe take a T4 and T3 combination, because remember, T4 still has to be converted to T3 in the liver, and that requires optimal liver function. And so sometimes taking thyroxine ends up not being effective because your body's having a conversion issue. Your body's having a hard time converting T4, which is what your thyroid makes, into T3, and that conversion happens mostly in the liver, but also in the gut and the bones. If my TPO number is at 4 from 59, does that mean I'm in remission? Yeah, I mean, I guess you would say that your thyroid is less inflamed, which is a really good sign. Yeah, I mean, I don't really focus on the terms, but I guess you could consider it like, yeah, I'm in remission. What about maca root capsules for hormone improvement? Yeah, you guys, so, when it comes to supplementation, it can be helpful, but you need to get to the foundational things. If your body is not getting enough fuel or over-exercised or not sleeping well or not getting enough sunlight, no amount of freaking maca root is going to do anything for you. It can sometimes actually be too overly stimulating, and maca root needs to be gelatinized, you guys. It cannot be raw or it will damage your thyroid even further. It is a goitrogen and it is a cruciferous vegetable. And so if you're consuming raw maca all the time, expect your thyroid function to actually lower. I've actually been diagnosed with candida and mold, but didn't know it could cause head and ear pressure. Had the candida for a long time, but can't seem to fix it. Yeah, so you guys have to understand that the current treatment of candida is to go on a candida diet, which is pretty much just a low sugar diet, and to starve the candida. The problem with this is that it is very, very inaccurate. It's not understanding the organism. Candida is a very opportunistic organism, and it will survive. It will try to survive regardless of what you give it. And so a lot of people make the mistake of starving it, going on a very low sugar, low carbohydrate diet to make it even more vicious. And it starts to send out its little fingers into your bloodstream, and it starts to spread. So if you want to actually keep it localized, the key is to feed it enough so that it stays in the gut and it doesn't actually become a systemic issue. That's the first step. And then it's to kill it. Sometimes if you have a really bad candida issue, diflucan or nystatin prescribed to you by your doctor tends to be more effective than the herbal protocols. And if you've constantly been on herbs, like a lot of people make the mistake of taking anti-candida herbs all the time. And you have to understand that candida gets used to those things. It becomes desensitized and it won't kill, those herbs will not kill it any longer. And so that's why it's very important to rotate your herbs. If you're trying to kill it the natural way and you don't want to take nystatin or diflucan, then you have to take one herb for like 3 weeks and then you've got to rotate it. Or if you want to go crazy with it, you can take one herb for 4 days and then rotate to the new herb and rotate. Like, so for example, you do caprylic acid for 4 days and then you do oregano oil for 4 days and then you do undesolinic acid for 4 days and then neem oil for 4 days and so on and so forth. And you're really killing it, like you're killing it with different weapons. And you're also making sure it's fed so it stays localized in the gut. A lot of times, once it gets starved, it actually ends up becoming a systemic issue. I see women get a lot of yeast infections from doing anti-candida diets, or they get a lot of sinus infections. And so I recommend checking out that sinus rinse. Just type in on Google Dave Asprey sinus rinse, and it has like xylitol in it, grapefruit seed extract, which all break down biofilms. I also find that what is it called? Colloidal silver, but in a nasal spray can be helpful as well. You're actually sucking in that colloidal silver and getting it into your sinuses, which can also kill candida. I've heard that in getting a head massage with castor oil can help encourage hair growth. Do you know anything about this? I'm already using bentonite clay once a month. Want to know if I can speed it up. It can in some people. You have to be really consistent with castor oil. I find that aspirin I know it's funny, but aspirin actually works a lot better than any of the weird remedies out there. I actually bought a supplement that's coming. It's like a spray. It has aspirin, niacinamide, and what else does it have in it? Aspirin, niacinamide, and something else, which are all caffeine, which are all promoters of hair growth. And so I'm going to try it out, and then I'll let you guys know how it works. But I've heard really great things about applying aspirin topically to your scalp for hair growth, and I really want to. This like little guy is starting to grow in. I was previously like pretty bald right here, and so I'm trying to like speed it up. My hair is like slowly growing back, and I have all these like new baby hairs, but I'm like annoyed a little bit, so I want to speed this up. So I'm gonna try Solban, which is the aspirin, caffeine, niacinamide blend, and then I'll let you guys know how it works. But I haven't personally have any benefit with castor oil. I tried to do it like consistently, but it's just like so sticky, and it's just hard to like sustain. Like, you know, I try to put it on, and then I have to wash my hair in the morning, and unless I want to wash my hair every day, I'd have to use like, I can't use castor oil every day, and so it really only works if you're consistent with it. So it's just kind of like a situation where I'm not really sure. I know that a lot of African American girls find that it's very effective because their hair tends to be a little bit coarser, and so it will absorb the oil, whereas me, like, I have thinner, finer hair, and so I can't hide the fact that it's oily. So, you know, it's just kind of one of those things where you kind of have to find what works for you. But if you can handle the castor oil, it's totally worth a try. Why do most women gain weight during perimenopause? Usually because, remember, so estrogen is created in a lot of your tissues. Your body can create estrogen in multiple places. Plus, we're getting exposed to a lot of endocrine disruptors. But our body can only make progesterone in the ovaries and a small amount in the adrenal glands. And so a lot of women, when they're going through menopause, there's a lot of stress. There's also a lot of estrogen in relationship to progesterone. And progesterone production does get low after menopause, and that does affect thyroid function. So I believe it has a lot to do with the fact that estrogen is high, and so that's making you more insulin resistant. You don't have progesterone, and so therefore your thyroid is suboptimally functioning, and then you're not burning glucose as effectively. And so overall, I find that progesterone and pregnenolone supplementation during menopause can be really beneficial. I know this isn't a PCOS subject, but I'd love you to go in depth on HPV, as it's such a taboo subject in our society. Yeah, I would definitely love me to go into that topic too. I don't have a ton of experience with it just because I think, like you said, it's very taboo. And so even if my clients were coming to me, they might not disclose that they have HPV just due to like being ashamed of it or not really wanting to talk about it. I need to definitely do some research before I go into it. But thank you for the suggestion, and I will definitely put that on my content list to talk about it some more. I do know, like, I follow a few, like, I read a lot of scientific journals, and there's a few biochemists that I really like that work with a lot of nutritional and hormonal supplementation. And I've heard that sometimes vitamin E can be very helpful for HPV, just helping subdue the virus and getting it kind of under control. But that's really like the only thing that I've come across in my research that really like directly addresses HPV. But I'll definitely look into it more. And when I feel comfortable enough sharing about it and have enough research-based evidence, I will be happy to share about it. Yeah, I don't find that it's taboo to me. Kill SIBO first or fix thyroid function and metabolism? You know what? I think both should be done at first, but I think it's impossible to heal SIBO long term if it's a recurring infection if your metabolism isn't fixed. And I find, like I said, you can really find a sweet spot between eating, certain carbohydrates, specifically juices can be helpful, so that you're not feeding the SIBO that's being very rapidly absorbed. You're still combining it with protein and fat, so it's not going to spike your blood sugar too much. So the juices are going to feed the thyroid, but they're not going to feed the bacteria. So maybe for a limited amount of time, you can stay, you can continue with your SIBO work, but you can also focus on getting carbs that might not feed the SIBO, and there is a sweet spot. Remember that juices and sugars like fructose and even sucrose, like in organic cane sugar and coconut sugar and those types of things, they're absorbed very rapidly via the stomach. So by the time they got to the small intestine, they probably wouldn't feed your bacterial overgrowth anyways. So I would do both. I don't think they're all inclusive, and they can be both done together. I found that most of the majority of SIBO information, like when you type in killing SIBO or like how to heal SIBO naturally online, I'm like false, 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 false. Like every single article, I'm like false, false, false. Like people just don't understand it. Like they don't. Like they act like it's just like its own thing. And I'm like, almost everyone that comes to me has some type of form of small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, because if things are slowly moving through your digestive tract, of course they're going to rot and ferment, and that equals bacteria and fungus where it doesn't belong. I also have a theory that this like new phase of, or this new fad, I should say, of taking probiotic supplements is actually causing more SIBO infections than ever before, because think about it, bacteria is getting into a place where it does not belong. I also think that too many fermented foods can be a problem for people as well. And so I think that the small intestine should stay sterile. If you're going to take a probiotic, it should be a spore-based probiotic. And that is the end of story. I don't think that fermented foods and probiotics are should be eaten in such a high amount like people are all of a sudden purporting. They're all of a sudden like, you should just chug sauerkraut. And I'm like, no, those are like volatile organisms. You don't really know how the environment that it was grown in. You don't know if there's really negative LPS producing organisms. And this is why I'm creating a gut program, you guys, is it's like a whole separate issue. This is a whole thing. And it's very, once Fully Nourished is done, that's my next kind of goal, is to come out with a gut program, because I think that I think the metabolism needs to be healed first, honestly. But I also find it's very difficult to heal the metabolism and eat metabolically enhancing foods like dairy and fruit when you have small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, because that's going to affect how you digest those foods. So it's kind of like they work together, and you kind of have to work on both together. And it can be a process for sure. It's not like a black and white situation. It's kind of like you got to feel your body out a little bit and be like, this is what's working for me, and I don't care what anybody else says, this is what I'm doing. But sometimes in SIBO, just taking MMR, migrating motor complex, MMC, I said MMR, no, MMC, migrating motor complex, stimulating herbs, like to get digestive function moving quickly through the digestive tract, that can really, really help with getting rid of SIBO completely. Like your body's doing its own thing. You're enhancing the body's ability to move things quickly through the digestive tract. And sometimes that's enough. I like one called Antrantil. It's available on Amazon. It's called Antrantil. And also, what's it called? I think it's called Interphase Plus. I think I'm getting that confused with something. Motil Pro. That's another one. So Motil Pro, Anfantril, and then just direct ginger can all really help move transit time through the small intestine. Somebody said, I love your matter-of-factness. Thank you. I just try to keep it real, you guys. Like, I think to me, honestly, I'm sick and tired of the freaking health and wellness community. Most of people are just blah, 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 like word vomit. And I'm just like, people, I believe in giving life-giving advice and bringing freedom to women and not the opposite. And I think a lot of people get really tripped up on their own egos, and their goal is to just make people miserable. I don't know. I don't know what else it could be, but sometimes when I hear things come out of people's mouths, I'm just mind-boggled. I'm like, why do you feel the need to restrict people so hard and make people feel so confined and restricted? It's just confusing. And I don't think women need to be more confused. Life is already confusing enough. Confused about meal spacing. Migrating motor complex requires time after food to kick in, but regulating blood sugar and metabolism needs frequent meals. Yeah, so I know it can be confusing. So it's kind of one of those things, like I've found certain clients are trying to push, we're trying to get the migrating motor complex to kick in, which takes about 90 to 100 minutes after eating, not after eating, really after the stomach has emptied, which is a whole separate issue because it sometimes can take 30 minutes for the stomach to empty. And so by the time, we count that up, that's almost 3 hours, sometimes more. And so, by the time 3 hours has gone by between meals, you're starving, like your blood sugar has dropped. So I think that something in the middle would be good. I think that it's really difficult to push your meal time to 3 to 4 hours when you're metabolically unstable. it can be quite stressful for the body. And so I think it's important to maybe, in between do like some bone broth or a juice or something, like something simple to absorb, but just something that you can actually like get some fuel into your body. But yeah, I mean, that is something that you kind of have to decide. I've seen SIBO, like I've helped multiple people overcome SIBO while they're still eating, 5 meals a day. So remember, your migrating motor complex will kick in while you're sleeping. It will go through multiple phases. It does it every 90 minutes if the stomach is empty. So, you could do that then. It's just really up to you and what you're comfortable with. But if you find yourself finding like you're hypoglycemic or low blood sugar, or you're not really doing very well, like you're metabolically unstable, you feel really high stress, high anxiety, it might not be working for you to push your meals as much as you are. So I find something in the middle usually effective for women, because you don't want to, like, in the process of killing SIBO, destroy your metabolism. Like there needs to be a fine line and a fine balance. And it's kind of like, I just recommend listening to your body, honestly. If you find yourself starving after an hour and a half, you might need to do some sort of fuel during that time. What if my body really isn't giving me the signs of hunger if I'm eating enough? History of anorexia. Do I go by energy levels, moods, instead of feeling of hunger? Yes. So a lot of times even, when metabolic function is low, our appetite can sometimes be impaired. Like we don't feel hungry when we're actually hungry, or we'll feel hungry when we're not actually hungry. It's very, it's just a hormonal imbalance. So I recommend going by moods. The minute you start to get like hangry, or what you can do is you can actually work on stimulating your appetite. So I recommend eating like 4 to 5 frequent smaller meals per day to kind of stimulate your appetite. And if you do that consistently for about 1 to 2 weeks, you usually find that you're starting to get an appetite after a little while, because your body's like, oh, I get fuel, like I can start working again. Remember, like I said, you need to consume fuel in order to burn fuel. And so if you're not consuming a lot, your body's going to kind of slow down to compensate. And so if you're trying to kind of get your hunger signals in, I would go by energy, I would go by mood, and then eventually if you're being very consistent with eating like 4 to 5 smaller meals throughout the day, you might find that you are getting hungry and you're getting those appetite signals. But I really recommend, like when women have had a history of an eating disorder, to really remember that this is a mind-body issue. If you believe that hunger is bad, you will suppress hunger signals. If you believe that hunger is your body saying, hey, I need something from you, it's a lot better. And this is coming from me. I have a history of bulimia and mostly bulimia, but also binge eating. So I struggled with that for so many years. And I have found that at first I really didn't honor my body's hunger signals because I was afraid of them, or I didn't respect them. I didn't respect my body at all. I believed that I knew what was best, and so I really tried to control my body. But that's like trying to control Mother Nature. Like, it's a force to be reckoned with. And you can either fight it, you can fight against the flow, or you can lean into it and you can learn to trust it and learn to see that as you begin to work with your body, it begins to respond. And it's kind of one of those things where you stand in awe, you honor, and you respect, and it usually responds. Can you walk me through how you oil pull? So many different ways oils people use online. Yes, so I simply use coconut oil, and in the morning I wake up and I have a routine. I go into my bathroom really quickly, I put a spoonful of coconut oil in my mouth. Well, I don't have a spoon, I just use my finger, honestly. Let's be real here. I use my finger, like about a tablespoon or so, or a teaspoon. And then what you do when you oil pull is it's oil pulling. So it's not swishing, it's not mouthwash. Your actual goal is to push and pull it through your teeth. So it's almost like a sucking motion, like you're sucking it through your teeth. And at first it should make your jaw kind of tired. Like you're gonna be like, wow, that's a lot of work. It's good for your neck muscles and it's good for your jaw muscles, but at first it can be a little tiresome, but that means you're doing it right. You're pushing and pulling it through your teeth. And then, after about 5 to 10 minutes, you just spit it out. I scrape my tongue, I brush my teeth, and I'm good to go. So I keep it very simple. Some people like to add tea tree oil and stuff, but I just keep it really simple, honestly. Also, do you recommend eating dairy products? I only have access to pasteurized in my country. It just kind of depends on how your body reacts. Sometimes when gut function is impaired, you can't digest dairy really well, or low progesterone or hypothyroidism can also cause issues with digesting dairy, so it just kind of just depends on your own body. Pasteurized milk is not necessarily bad. Sometimes it can actually be more helpful because depending on the season and what the cow is eating, certain bacteria in the milk can cause issues. So sometimes people do well with like pasteurized or even ultra pasteurized milk because it kills all the bacteria. Think of milk almost as like a probiotic. It does have a lot of bacteria in it. And so sometimes raw dairy can be too much for people that have impaired gut. So sometimes ultra pasteurized can be helpful. Just make sure it doesn't have additives like synthetic vitamins. Do you recommend not eating grains? Unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, like that was a weird word. I try to encourage you to casually avoid them as much as possible. It's okay to get them here and there, but I wouldn't make them like a part of your everyday, daily breakfast, lunch, and dinner diet. What was the name of the aspirin hairspray you mentioned? It's called Solban, and it's by Idea Labs on their website. Okay, I'm sorry, you guys. Instagram's cutting me off. It's been another hour. This will be saved. And if you have any more questions that didn't get answered, I will be going live again on Friday. Thank you so much for joining me, and I appreciate your time, and I'm so happy that you came.